basketball.
Curry sidestep, Curry drive, Curry flip, Curry good!
This is Just Dubs with John Dickinson.
We want to keep this show as interactive as possible. It's instant reaction. It's hearing from the fans. It's going inside the locker room.
On KNBR 104.5 and 6.8. Streaming live at twitch.tv/thesportsleader.
Lakers lead. Warriors have to throw it down the length. Hope for a miracle. Curry launches at the buzzer. Won't go, and the Lakers hold on and win in double overtime.
And that'll do it. The Warriors bounce back here at home. Needed to win desperately. They get it tonight against the 76ers. 119 to 107.
A 20-point win. This is a perfect start to the Warrior road trip and exactly what they needed.
All right, welcome in. Good Saturday morning to you. It's John Dickinson. It's Just Dubs with JD here on KNBR, the sports leader, as the Warriors getting a win last night, getting a win on Tuesday at Chase. That's 2 in a row after a couple of heartbreaking defeats at Chase Center to the Lakers and to the Sacramento Kings. We welcome you in again here on the sports leader. 808 KNBR is the number, 808 KNBR, to give me a call or shoot me a text here between now and noon, as we do it each and every Saturday here on KNBR, talking all things Warriors basketball and NBA basketball as well, as Greg Silver is on hand for this program, as he always is here for our Just Dubs and Dubs OT shows. And the Warriors last night handling business, getting the job done in Memphis, something that they were unable to do going back to January the 15th and the MLK holiday game in Memphis. One of the low points for the Warriors, that game and that ugly performance on the Monday afternoon in the fourth quarter in losing to the Grizzlies, but not last night for Golden State, as Jonathan Kuminga's emergence continues for the Warriors. Draymond Green being back in the fold, allowing this team to find something to hope for and play for here as they approach the trade deadline, with a number of players currently banged up that will be on the mend and potentially coming back, including Moses Moody, who could be back in action for the Warriors as soon as Monday when the Dubs are in Brooklyn. They are in Atlanta tonight, followed by that game in Brooklyn, then on to Philadelphia and Indiana before coming home the night before the Super Bowl to take on Phoenix, and then a couple of games at Utah before the break. And the Warriors also have one more home game before the break, as they will take on the Clippers. But these next couple of weeks, and really the next couple of games here, when you look at tonight and Monday and Wednesday, if the Warriors can get on a little bit of a run, I know they're 3-2 in the last 5 with the 2 one-point losses, but I think if they can get on a little bit of a run, maybe it changes what they look to do at the trade deadline, because all eyes are going to be on the trade deadline come Thursday, and just determining, do the Warriors continue to look to move off of Andrew Wiggins? It's so funny, and we bring in Greg Silver here on the Sports Leader. It's so funny when you look at all of the different reports really over the course of the last month, and a lot of it is here this day, here that on another day. Things change relatively quickly, but when you look at it, there's been, Warriors would be interested in trading Draymond and Clay reports. There's been Warriors don't want to move on from either of those guys. Andrew Wiggins could be had. Andrew Wiggins is playing better, so maybe not. I mean, even a month to a month and a half ago, it was, well, if you want to do a deal with Toronto, then Kuminga's going to have to be included. Would you do that? I think now that's a rousing and firm no. The Warriors would not be looking to trade Jonathan Kuminga at any cost. When you look at the 8 consecutive games that he's had of 20 or more points, and really has forged himself to being the true number 2 scoring option on this team, at least the most efficient one, behind Stephen Curry. And with Draymond Green back in the fold and Andrew Wiggins now a part of it, that's a front line that looks like it has the capability of maybe finding something here down the stretch of the season and leading the Warriors to at least having a shot at getting into the playoffs, even if it has to be, and I think at this point it most likely would have to be via the play-in tournament. So, yeah, Greg, good to be with you, my man, as always, on these Saturday mornings, and a lot to get into between now and noon. But as we talk about all the time on the Dubs OT shows, every single night is an evaluation of that night and who played well and who didn't, but it's also an evaluation of what this team needs to do at the trade deadline coming up now inside of a week on Thursday afternoon, and whether this team can retool itself in conjunction with what they already have to maybe make a run toward one of those final playoff spots.
Yeah, good morning. Nice to be with you. Long time no see, long time no speak. Hello to everyone out there on a beautiful Saturday morning, whatever you are doing, taking your kids to sports, going to get some coffee, just going out for a drive, whatever it may be. Thank you for choosing KNBR, the sports leader. And yeah, here's the deal with the Warriors. I mean, I will say this, and I teased it last night on Dubs OT, which is this is at least, for our purposes, a different kind of energy for a weekly recap. The Warriors have been rather messy for most of the season this so far, and I feel like at least now you can kind of look toward thinking, hey, there's a little bit of an identity there. Draymond has come back. He's given them life. He's not only helped the defensive end in terms of his individual impact, but the impact he's had on Jonathan Kuminga and Andrew Wiggins being able to play together on a defensive unit has been fantastic. It's something that the Warriors haven't really seen all year. So, you touched on it perfectly. Every night, it's an evaluation of who's playing well, who's not playing well. The trade deadline is coming up fast. This is our last Just Dubs before that said trade deadline. So I don't know if we're going to be sitting here a week from today as we get ready for a 49ers Chiefs Super Bowl and discussing a completely different iteration of this roster. I'm more inclined to say no, given the lack of hitting the panic button that Steve Kerr has always had while running this organization, given the trust he has in these veteran players. I don't think there's any of the young players that you would want to trade besides Jonathan Kuminga as your valuable asset, and it seems like they are very, very, very unlikely going to do that now. So I do think we'll by and large see a same, if not entirely the same, a very similar iteration of this team come a week from today. But yeah, we got the next 2 hours to break it all down, and Warriors 1-2 in a row, trying to make it 3 tonight.
Yeah, and we'll see if they can do that against the Hawks. I mean, I do think that there's a need for them to keep this thing rolling, to continue the push toward the 500 mark. I mean, we were talking about it a little bit before the show as we were getting ready to hit the airwaves here, and it really, the Warriors are not on a run, although as you laid out, it does feel a lot better than it did in the weeks prior, and really better, I think, than it did a month ago. But this is still a team that's 3 games under 500 and needs to get wins to continue to fight. But I think the one thing that has been good for this team, and it's Jonathan Kuminga's emergence is the headlining aspect to it. But I think that the more important component to it is that Kuminga is starting to become the kind of player, and the Kuminga, Wiggins, Draymond Green front line with Draymond at center and Kuminga at the 4 and Wiggins at the 3, because Wiggins has played better over the last couple of weeks, because Draymond is back, and that's helped improve this team on both ends. We're starting to see this team be more competitive on a night-in, night-out basis, which is a good thing. But we're also seeing that front line is something with Wiggins under contract for a couple of more years and Draymond under contract for 3 more years after this, and Kuminga completely under team control here for as long as the Warriors want him to be, really the remainder of this year, next year, as we've laid out. And if the Warriors want to keep Jonathan Kuminga, which obviously why wouldn't they at this point given the way that he's played, he'll be around for at least the next 5 years, if they want him to be, and plus this season. So that front line does play moving forward. Like it can be a part of the future, and it's not Kuminga independent, which I think is really important. It's the fact that all of a sudden you might have 4 of the 5 players in a starting lineup around Stephen Curry, or including Stephen Curry, that could be part of this next 2 to 3 years, whether you want to include this year as the third year, whether you want to include the next 2 years following this year plus another as the third year. I think 2 years to be sure off of after this year. It's that Curry window. And yes, you want to be concerned about the down-the-road future and how a guy like Kuminga can fit there. But I think the question was, and the boxes, Greg, that Kuminga needed to check for this season were, could he be an effective role player on this team that helps them to win? And he's doing that now, and he's doing it with the other players that the Warriors need to be successful, for them to have a chance to get on a little bit of a run. So the box is checked for now. I think the last month he's played at higher than just a role player level, but he's checking that box when he hadn't consistently checked it really at any point yet in his career, which is great for him. It's great for this season for the Warriors, but I think, Greg, we can also start to look down the road of there may be some action here with the Draymond, Kuminga, Wiggins front line. All of a sudden, Wiggins is showing some life. And if Wiggins can get back to closer to what he was a couple of years ago without even being where he was a couple of years ago, I think you'd find that his contract very quickly becomes not as bad as it seemed a month ago when Wiggins appeared to be just completely and utterly lost. So as you start, and look, wins are the name of the game, but as you start to really hone in on Kuminga and Podziemski and Wiggins' improved play and Draymond being back and Steph Curry's window, you start to look around and maybe you do have 5 or 6 players that fit. I don't want to say both timelines, but the timeline for the rest of this year and next year. And then the question becomes, Greg, how do you augment the rest of the roster at the best way possible to try and finish this season strong, but also be able to be a better team next year and the following year than you've even been this year or last year?
Well, look, we said this last night, and it's that the Warriors absolutely do not want to have to trade Andrew Wiggins, right? Like, the only reason that was coming up in discussion so frequently is because of how underwhelming.
Can you offload him? That was the deal, right?
Exactly. Like, he was so underwhelming and underperforming of his contract that it was just very much an offload talk. But if you're getting the version of Andrew Wiggins that has been showing up of late, someone who can generally be very good and solid defensively and, has a chance to be decent offensively for the most part, well, then that's a big game changer. And with the way Jonathan Kuminga has been getting some output offensively, and the note I'll touch on with Kuminga is I like what you said about him checking the boxes. And the first one is going to be, can he be an effective role player on this team? Because I know many fans out there in the Bay Area see him as much more than that. I know his ceiling is a lot higher than that. But I think it's like you got to go step by step and climb up the ladder first. And a lot of people wanted to see him blossom into a star immediately because of the ceiling he had and the great highlight plays that were available. But now you're seeing, hey, Jonathan Kuminga has learned what he needs to do to help the team. Oh, and by the way, he's so talented and athletic and plays so well downhill that he's fully capable of being more than just a role player, but he needed to learn how to function as a role player in the system first. And I think you're finally seeing that come to full fruition. So that is something, as you look long-term, going back to, kind of how you framed the discussion to begin with, that's something that gives you optimism long-term. If Andrew Wiggins can kind of round back into form and be a great defensive piece long-term, then you're in good business. I mean, at least compared to where you were at a month ago. Now, what I want to ask you, JD, is one thing we've discussed is the lack of shooting. And you've asked me before, is Steph, Clay, Kuminga, Wiggins, and Draymond enough shooting out there on the floor? the team, no doubt that lineup is playing much better defensively as of late. But I still don't know about that when you have Curry, who's there, Klay Thompson, who has been either very on or very off, and then Kuminga's been making some threes, but you don't like him shooting high volume. Wiggins, kind of the same deal, and Draymond has kind of had a bit of a shooting revival, but still not someone I want to see pulling from 25 feet in the fourth quarter all the time.
No, I don't think that they have enough shooting, but I think when you have Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, you just have to roll with it. And look, Klay's kind of in his own – he's on his own island, right, as far as what the decision is. I wouldn't move on from Klay Thompson by Thursday. I mean, it's been reported both ways, but I think Klay Thompson's earned the right to be around on this team. Even if he winds up not being back next year, he's earned the right to finish the season with the Warriors. And I just don't think the Warriors need to be in position where they should be making panic moves at this point. Like, it doesn't have to be trade for trade's sake at the deadline. And, I think they've showed a little reason for some optimism here over the course of these last 5 games with the 3 wins and the 2 1-point losses. But it doesn't have to be, I don't think Steph, Klay, Draymond aren't going anywhere. Kuminga's not going anywhere. I would add Wiggins now back into that category of, and I don't feel like the Warriors have this pressure to offload Wiggins. And again, we've talked so much about if you offload Wiggins, then you need to be taking a small forward back in return, because the Warriors' only true small forward on the entire roster is Andrew Wiggins. Klay Thompson's played a lot of 3. The Warriors are still reluctant to play Kuminga at the 3. I don't think the Warriors would be looking to make a Wiggins trade to open up time for Kuminga at the 3. I think they love him at the 4. And they like the combination now that we've seen here over this last week plus with Draymond and Wiggins, playing together. But if you trade Wiggins, you don't have a true 3. They don't view Moody as a true 3. I think they view him as a 2-3. I think he's more of a 3 than a 2 personally in today's NBA, talking about Moses Moody. But they don't view him that way, just as they don't view Brandon Podziemski as a straight-up point guard. They view him as more of a combo, or even more of a 2, really, because he's been on the floor predominantly only with point guards. Not the case last night, though, for Brandon Podziemski, who did get some backup point guard minutes and did have 14 assists with no turnovers. So maybe the conversation shifts a little bit with Podziemski, and I'm open to that. But I would almost put Podziemski, Greg, in that category of, all right, I think you've seen what he can do with the veteran players, and now with, we've seen what Kuminga now can do with the veteran players, not just being a role player, although that was the first box to be checked, but now becoming potentially a secondary scorer with Stephen Curry, a player that can start the game and then sub out, come back, play with the bench group, really look to be a dominant scorer. That's what was so impressive when you look at just last night specifically. It was the fact that Kuminga didn't get off to a great start, had some defensive miscues early in that game last night, and then subbed out, came back, and we've seen the Warriors really try to get him going with that second unit beginning of second quarters, and almost, look to be the number 1 with Stephen Curry not on the court in those situations. Then he gets going, and then he is more effective when he comes back and he plays with the starters, and more effective as the game goes on. So I think they found something there. But yeah, I look at it now as, for the time being, Steph, Klay, Wiggins, Kuminga, Draymond. Podziemski I'd put in the category of, you like what you've seen in his ability to play with the veteran players. And then it leads you to, all right, well, what do you do beyond that? You've got Chris Paul and GP2 and Moses Moody coming back. How do they fit? And how do you make this roster better? Kevon Looney, I know Steve Kerr talked about the fact that he really is, this week he hurts for Looney, and Looney's one of his favorite players, and it's tough to basically have to go away from him, given everything that he's brought to the table for the Warriors, but Looney not as effective or as a part of things? Do you look to make some kind of a move there? You may need Looney down the line. Like, there are a lot of questions when you separate from, let's say, the starting five now with Kuminga in it, and if you add Podziemski into the keeper group, who are the non-keepers at that point? Is Moses Moody somebody now that gets dangled? Do you do something with Chris Paul's contract, Greg? GP2 coming back is going to be a player that certainly improves the Warriors' defense, but how can he be on the floor with lineups that other lineups that need to be effective together, because he's not somebody that's he's an ancillary scorer. He's a scorer based on everything else that the Warriors do in the context of their offense. So I think GP2 is somebody you'd like to have around, but you got to find the right combinations and lineups for him.
GP2 to me is absolutely a keeper, and he's a real gamer when it comes to postseason. If the Warriors are fortunate enough to make it that far, and Gary Payton II can be healthy, because those are two big question marks right now. But Gary Payton II, I think when you go and look back at the 2 1-point losses this week, that's where you're really aching for a guy like GP2. You could do a little bit of offense-defense substitutions with Stephen Curry down the stretch. I know Corey Joseph gets people very riled up, and he was getting some minutes at the very end of that Lakers game. I mean, look, you don't want to have Corey Joseph out there to defend a lengthy and physical Lakers team, or at least a LeBron James. But, I think it was Wiggins and Clay had fouled out, and Gary Payton II's hurt, and Moses Moody's not available. I think Gary Payton II is a great piece to have for a team that has really struggled defensively. And you look at the type of teams that the Warriors have struggled with this year, take the Kings and their up and down speed. Get someone that can just neutralize a De'Aaron Fox a little bit. I don't know exactly what to make of Chris Paul's return, because we've said time and time again that Steve Kerr seemed to have a much harder time when there are 10 to 11 capable players at his disposal, whereas when there's a little bit closer to 8 or 9, he actually does a better job figuring out the rotations, and I think doesn't feel like he has to be plugging and unplugging constantly because of the inconsistent play of X, Y, and Z. So I still do think Chris Paul is very much missed on the taking care of the ball front and protecting a lead in a fourth quarter kind of aspect. Like you saw with Podziemski last night, you mentioned it, Chris Paul's stat line, 14 assists, 0 turnovers. That was impressive stuff from the rookie. And, going just to tie it back to what you were going on a few minutes ago before we end up breaking shortly here, is that Podziemski and Kuminga have been able to take on bigger roles, but in very different manners, because Kuminga has really evolved into that secondary scorer, and now he's had this whole streak of 20-point games, and that's been awesome to see. Podziemski has been a lot more of a playmaker, and I think that's something that can very much be missed at times in this offense. You see the struggle of getting the ball in the hoop when defenses just zero in on Steph Curry in the final few minutes of games that are tight, and all these clutch games that the Warriors have had. Get another guy that can not necessarily light you up for 15 points in the fourth quarter, but be able to make plays, and I think that's going to make a big difference for them as well.
All right, 808 KNBR, let's get to a couple of calls here. It's just Dubs with JD here on The Sports Leader. We've got Greg Silver along here as well. Let's get to the phones. We'll get it rolling with Danny in Vancouver up first here on KNBR this morning. Hey, Danny.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
Doing well this morning.
Good. A couple comments, and I have a question for you. I really enjoyed that game last night. I know they were playing against the Memphis G League team, but I really liked how their defense was yesterday. They seemed to be rotating. We didn't see those wide open threes all night, which just kills us. I think Draymond is just playing out of this world right now. I've just been so impressed since he's been back, how well he's playing. And it's so fun to see Kuminga's growth. I really wasn't quite sure how he was going to develop, if into the player, but it's a lot of fun. So that's been great. So I really enjoyed the game last night. And I'm just wondering, I know Moody's coming back. he's got size. He's a 3-and-D guy. Why couldn't he? I know this is kind of a drastic comment, but why couldn't he start instead of Clay some nights? I mean, he's got size. He can shoot. Plays good defense. And that's it. Curious about your comment.
No, I appreciate it, Danny. I just don't think that's a move that they would want to make. I mean, and I think Moody, it would be on him to force the Warriors' hand, basically, to supplant Klay Thompson. We know Klay Thompson wants to start. We know Klay Thompson still not only believes he's a starter, but it's been reported still believes that he's a max $40 million a year kind of a player. And so, Moody would have to force, I think, Klay Thompson's hand by having Klay not play well and Moody come back off the injury almost in starting over and play exceptional. I don't even think it's a question of stardom. I think it's a question of could Moody work his way back into, and let's be honest, as well as Moody was played and was starting to get run before he got hurt, he's going to have to earn it again because this team's got some action with some of the other guys that are out there. I think the question would be, could Moody end up finishing games at some point? But if Kuminga is going to be out there and Draymond's going to be out there and Wiggins is going to be out there and Steph's going to be out there most nights, that's 4. And so you have to determine, is Klay the 5th? Is Podziemski the 5th? Is Moody the 5th? Is GP2 the 5th? Like, how does all that fit? Is Chris Paul the 5th? Like, when you start to see all these players that are coming back and the 4, and I don't think that Wiggins necessarily is a lock to finish necessarily every game, but the Warriors are better when Wiggins is playing well enough to be a closing player, along with Kuminga and Draymond when they're obviously playing at their highest level. So it's absolutely something to monitor here moving forward. All right, we'll pause. Duck Sauce, hold the line. I'm coming to you first. I want to give you time. I don't want to have a rushed call. So Duck Sauce in San Jose, right out of the chute, as Just Dubs is off and running here on a Saturday on KNBR 104.5 and 680, the sports leader.
live from downtown.
Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang!
This is Just Dubs with John Dickinson on the Sports Leader. Streaming live at KNBR.com and on the KNBR app.
Seconds left, first half. Kuminga, the discard and jam! Kuminga with a grown man's move.
Yeah, Jonathan Kuminga, that from Tuesday against the Sixers, as he continues to roll at least 20 points and 50% shooting in each of the last 8 games. First Warrior to do that, as we learned last night on Dubs OT, since Jordan Poole did it not even quite 2 years ago, March 3rd to March 20th of 2022. We're back here on Just Dubs on KNBR, the Sports Leader. 808 KNBR is the number. Let's get to Duck Sauce in San Jose here on the Sports Leader. Hey, Duck Sauce, good Saturday to you. How are you?
Hey, JD, my guy, man. Good to hear you. It took me a minute to kind of figure out what happened to you, but I was glad to put 2 and 2 together and be listening to you again.
Absolutely.
Had a couple
Appreciate it.
One on Kuminga. I know, me and you have talked in the past before, just kind of, I think we agreed that, until his handle improved, he would always be a 4. And I wouldn't necessarily say that his handle has gotten immensely better, although it has looked smoother to me at times. What I think he's done is he's matured in identifying like what he's not good at right now, and he's simplifying what he does to the rim. And I mean, to me, it's paid huge dividends for him. And I think that shows a lot of maturity, just in him doing that. The other comment I had was on I would never want the team to not be healthy, and I definitely think Chris Paul and getting GP2 back is going to, that it can be impactful in the lineup for sure. But one thing with guys being out lately, I think it kind of got rid of the logjam that they had, and it kind of helped solidify roles for certain guys on this team. And I was just, I was wondering what your thoughts were on that. But, yeah, great to be listening to you again, JD, and that's all I got, buddy. Have a good day.
Appreciate you, Duck Sauce. And, yeah, each and every Saturday here, 10 to noon, and following every Warriors game here right at the Final Horn, we'll have Dubs OT for you here on KNBR, the Sports Leader. As far as the trade deadline question, I still think the Warriors have to try to clear some of the glut and some of the logjam at the trade deadline. And I'm not sure how they do it. Again, I've stated who I don't think is part of it. I mean, I would Steph, Clay, Wiggins, Kuminga, Draymond, Podziemski. I think those are the 6 for sure. And then you look at it beyond that, and who's coming back. And I think I think you got to look at Chris Paul. I think you got to look at Moses Moody. I think, GP2, somebody, as Greg, you pointed out in the first segment, really plays well as a playoff guy. I mean, Peyton is a player that the Warriors have never truly intended to count on him for more than really about 15 to 20 minutes a game. And I think part of that is to help keep him healthy, because if he is going to be playing too much more than that, and the Warriors have found themselves really leaning on him, I think in a far more than they've wanted to, but by necessity. And I think that's been part of maybe why he's had the inability to stay healthy. And so I think, Gary Payton II can be a keeper, but he's also somebody that you don't want to have to play a lot of regular season minutes, because you want to make sure that he's healthy and able to play in a playoff series where he can, be a potential eraser against a top flight scorer on another team. So I think it comes down to, and these are not the sexiest of options, but it's, do you do something with Chris Paul? And if you don't, again, as I've laid out many times, you don't have to, because you could trade him in the offseason and still reap the benefit of the salary relief and or acquiring a $30 million player to bring back if the Warriors wanted to go down that road. So I think Moody is the other. Like, if Moody, because Peyton is also coming back, isn't going to get the run that he wants, then maybe he becomes somebody that becomes expendable. But if you're making you're not just making a trade to clear a glut. You're making a trade to bring in a complementary player to the rest of the group that you deem to be the now core. And I think the now core is those 6 players that I mentioned: Steph, Clay, Podziemski in the backcourt with Wiggins, Kuminga, and Draymond Green on the front line. I think Kevon Looney finds himself in that category, as much as Steve Kerr loves him and Warrior fans appreciate everything that he's brought to the table. And Looney's somebody that you'd want to have in a playoff series going up against a big. But he hasn't been the same player this season, and especially, I think, over the last month and a half. So it's tricky. And as far as Kuminga goes, I don't know that his handle is better, Greg, but he's driving decisively, and he's not putting himself in positions where he really has to dribble a lot. He's driving when the defense is off balance, and he knows he can get there in 2 dribbles, basically, or less than 2 dribbles. There has been the majority of his work has come without having to put the ball on the deck a lot. Now, they've done more of that. The Sacramento game a week and a half ago, I think the Kings were kind of daring Kuminga to be an isolation-based player, put it on the deck, dribble. He was making moves. He was getting, he has done a little more of that. But I don't think that's where Kuminga's at his best, is, basically putting him in position. You can put him in positions to ISO him, but it's got to be quick. It can't be, Greg, put it on the deck, look to make a move. Like, I think as well as he played against Sacramento, the fact that the Warriors were spending so much effort to give him the ball, like when he's at his best, it can't be the Warriors spending a lot of effort getting him the ball. He just gets the ball and goes and scores and boom, and it's efficient, and it's in conjunction with everything else that they're doing on the floor in terms of balance. That's when it's the most effective. I thought even in the Sacramento game when he had 29 or 31 or whatever it is, I mean, it was a great game scoring wise. It was still a little too trying to get the ball to Kuminga because he was one of their best players. And I think that in some ways played into the Kings' hands on that particular night in some of the key moments down the stretch. But I don't know that the handle's better. He's just picking his spots to go in areas where he doesn't necessarily, where he can get away with the handle that he's got.
Yeah, and I was actually just pulling up Kuminga's turnover numbers, and I know that stat alone isn't going to tell us everything because he's getting more minutes now, and he still doesn't handle the ball like crazy. He's averaging a turnover and a half per game and 1.6 assists per game, so it's about a 1-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio, and I think largely that's beside the point, but I was just kind of curious to look into that because of how they're getting the ball to Kuminga a little bit more. I like seeing when he is decisive and quick with it. Like either get the ball and go downhill and try to get to the line, or, all right, let's see if I can make a play and just elsewhere and quickly get out of it. I think he's actually done a pretty good job with that. As of late, I think the offense can really get into a hole when not just Kuminga, but really anybody just kind of stalls it by holding the ball a little bit too long and forcing Steph or somebody else to move like crazy without the ball and get open. And, oh, by the way, the shot clock in the NBA is only 24 seconds, so you don't have all day to get something up and moving. But, yeah, I'm kind of with you in that I do think his handle's improved a little bit. He's not someone I want to see primarily handling the ball a lot, but I do think he has become a more confident and decisive presence with the ball in his hand. So it's not necessarily the handle or like those ball handling fundamentals, but in terms of knowing what to do with the ball and how long to hold on with it, I would say that has drastically improved, and that has given the offense a big boost.
And the next phase is the hand. I mean, when you start looking at, well, what are the next things? It's an improved handle, which allows him to play more three, which is not necessarily a goal for this season. I think that's more of an off-season, continue to emerge and add things to your game, more of it. And the three-point shot. But at the same time, yes, he needs to improve his three-point shot, but I also think you don't, and Steve Kerr's mentioned this, want him to really fall in love with that shot, because I think Kuminga wants to shoot the three. Like that's, and I think part of the Warriors' ability to get the most out of Kuminga and coach him to get the most out of him is to basically tell him not to take the three a lot. And it goes back to the whole shot chart is elite comment from Steve Kerr following one of the games earlier this week, and that basically is stick in the paint and stick on drives and only take maybe 1-3 a game, maybe 1 or 2 if it's wide open and it's one of those shots created must be taken. The offense kind of crumbles if you don't take it in terms of balance and everything. But it's improved the 3-point shot, but don't just be comfortable, because I do think there's times where Kuminga, again, it kind of goes back to that how he views himself as a player. And I think, he views himself like he wants to be somebody that's going to make the three ball. And I think in time that may come. But right now it's all about getting to the bucket and getting the twos and taking advantage of an off-balance defense and all of that stuff. And then defensively, when he's locked in and engaged, he's a pretty damn good on-ball defender. But he is still, I think, a poor help defender. And so, again, we're just looking at things that need to be evaluated moving forward. It's not necessarily, anything that's of alarm. It's just, all right, you're seeing him level up to where he can be a rotation player, a starting player, maybe even a secondary scorer. I think the future all-star, future star stuff was always going to be there. I've never doubted the fact that he had the potential down the line to be that level of player. It's just a matter of could he do it in the context of the rest of what the Warriors are trying to do with this team. The other part of the trade deadline, Greg, is, and I want to go back to something that you said, but the other part of the trade deadline, and 808 KNBR is the number. It's just Dubs with JD, John Dickinson here on The Sports Leader, 808 KNBR, to give us a call or shoot us a text. But yeah, you mentioned shooting, and I was discussing just the notion of, finding players that fit the new core. And again, Steph, Clay, if you count Wiggins, which I do for the time being, I count Kuminga, Draymond, Podziemski. Well, what do you need? And I think you were on it, Greg. Shooting is part of the deal. I think as you look at where this has put the Warriors with Kuminga and Wiggins now playing together and Draymond playing the 5, I think this opens up, as you look at the roster and what do they need, can they find a big – I think they're more open now with Draymond playing the 5 to finding a big that can shoot a little bit and that is a little bit skilled, but more of a true big, not like a Saric stretch, a guy, not like a Saric can play the 5 in a pinch. But I think as you look at ways to augment this roster and this group, it's a true 5 that can shoot some from the outside. Now, look, those aren't just readily available everywhere, but I think you look at, I think the big, if Looney's not as effective, Saric has played, I think, more 4 than 5 of late, which has made him more effective, but it becomes not necessarily a starter. I know some people are saying, Greg, well, you got to if you could get a starting big and, that takes some heat off of Draymond and you can save Draymond. Like, I don't know that the Warriors are going to be afforded that luxury. And here's the other thing. If you find a big that's going to start and bump Draymond back to the 4, then that means Kuminga's probably coming off the bench because the Warriors still don't view him as a 3. So, and I don't think anybody wants that. So you got to look at the balance. If you want Kuminga to remain in the starting lineup, if Draymond being at the 5 has unlocked Kuminga and Wiggins, then that means Draymond's just going to have to play the 5. And they're going to have to find ways in game, Greg, to put other players on the floor that complement or balance things. What do you think of finding that shooting? I think the other position really would be backup 3. Like, can you find a backup 3 that can knock down some shots? And be a capable defender. But I think those are the two areas as you look at what would this Warriors team need in conjunction with that emerging top 6 here over the last month.
So I got some good news and bad news for all the listeners when we're talking about the shooting discussion, right? So the bad news is that the Warriors' small ball style did them so well for many, many years. And I think over the past few years, we've started to see a little bit of a resurgence of what I'd like to call the modern NBA big man. I mean, look at the past 5 MVPs. It was Embiid, 2 Jokic, 2 Giannis, like not your typical guard, really, since those 2 Steph Curry ones. And then I think James Harden was in 2018. Although I would have voted for LeBron that year, but I digress. So that's the bad news, is that, need a little bit more big men presence, I think, as you're going to move forward and try to capitalize on these later years of the Steph Curry prime. The good news is that because of the way the game has evolved, I think a lot of big men can shoot, and not everyone's going to be as skilled as a Jokic or an Embiid and have the ability to reliably make threes from the outside while still being able to play, make, and dominate on the inside. But I think as you look at future draft classes or the G League or any type of trade prospect, I don't think there's going to be a lack of availability in terms of people that can capably shoot the ball. And I think that's one thing that is not going to be a terrible thing for the Warriors moving forward. I think it's just more of a concern this year, frankly, with the inconsistencies of Clay. I think Wiggins and Kuminga are both capable of making threes, but they're not the type of players you want taking 6+ a game from beyond the arc. So I don't think shooting is going to be a hard thing to find out there in the basketball world, but I do think that finding a skilled big man that also can shoot, like a Porzingis type of player that would have been available this last offseason, that's going to be a little bit more of a short-term challenge. I don't know what your thoughts on all that are, JD.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thought is, as far as that wing, or it maybe you give Moses Moody those minutes, but then how does Peyton fit if you give Moses Moody those minutes? And then as far as the big goes, it's a matter of again, I think what are you ultimately going to give up to bring that player in? But I do think a big that can shoot the ball some is in a different way than Saric is the kind of player that can really help this team. But there's a lot of different and I think you have to start if you view this. And look, we don't know. I mean, we know Kuminga at this point's a keeper. We'll see if he plateaus or comes back down to earth a little bit. Again, I've seen enough to know that I want to see him finish the season and move forward. And I think he's played well enough over the last month to where we're going to have to revisit the whole conversation about him being extension eligible and what he views himself as being worth versus what the Warriors view him as being. I mean, he will be extension eligible coming up here in the fall. And the Warriors are going to have to make a decision on that versus allowing him to be a restricted free agent. And so all of those things come into play. But as you look to balance the roster and clear some of the log jam, I do think that that's something. And if the Warriors can do all of that and maybe get their financial house in order a little bit, I think that's something that they could look to do. But you can't have, Greg, the guys that are coming back hurt the momentum that the guys that are playing right now have started to bring to the table. And so it can't be, if Chris Paul's going to play, then Chris Paul's not going to play 30. And if Chris Paul can't be on your team and not play 30, like if he's not going to be happy, if he's not finishing games and he's not playing 30 minutes, then maybe you do have to look to move on from Chris Paul. If that's going to be the case, maybe you do have to look to do that. If Moses Moody isn't going to play on this team between now and the end of the year, then maybe you look to move Moses Moody. If you feel like you have enough defensively, which I don't know how the Warriors would, but if you feel like you have enough defensively to maybe look to move on from GP2, you would do that with another year still left on Gary Payton II's deal after this year. But it's a big-time balance. There's no doubt about it, Greg.
Yeah, well, when we look at those 3 players, first of all, absolutely cannot kill the momentum. I mean, there's still a 3 games below 500 team, and we're starting to feel like, maybe the tides are turning just for the better, just for a little bit. Just give me some stability here. out in the Bay Area.
And that's on Kerr. Like, that legitimately is on Steve Kerr. Like, it's on him to, if the guys coming back are going to play, he has to play them in a way that doesn't screw up the momentum that these other guys have built, or he has to not play them, like, straight up, or not play them as much. And the default, Greg, can't just be, well, that means Moses Moody isn't playing, right? Because that always feels like that's the default. And look, I get Moody's going to have to earn his minutes more. He's going to have to build back up now that he's healthy. I see some backup 3 minutes for Moody. But if he's going to be getting backup 3 minutes, well, guess who's been the backup 3? Who's been the backup 3 of late?
Backup
Clay.
3 of late? Yeah,
so
Clay.
that maybe...
Yeah.
Yeah, so that means Clay maybe isn't quite playing as much unless Clay's hot, because you're going to give Moody some minutes. So it's a fine balance. I apologize. I'll let you finish your point, my man.
No, I mean, that's what this is all about, right? A good back and forth. And to talk about the 3 players, I think that Gary Payton II, to me, is the one you worry about by far the least, because he's never been a 30 minutes per game kind of player. He's not going to eat everybody else's minutes. And what he really does for this roster is something that you can't really replicate with anybody else on the roster. And I don't think he's taking a lot of shots from anybody either. Like, I think what you get from GP2, he's the perfect type of role player that the Warriors don't necessarily have. I'm not as worried about him. His biggest concern is just health. With Chris Paul, that's a very different discussion, because Chris Paul was getting a lot of minutes. I, by and large, think he's done very well at the tasks he was brought in to do in terms of helping the second unit function and not turning the ball over. That said, if Chris Paul is going to get a bunch of minutes coming back and the momentum is killed, then it is a huge problem, because that's like 3 point guards that you're going to be playing a lot. If you're talking Steph Curry, Chris Paul, and Brandon Pajemski is going to keep getting minutes. I mean, Steve Kerr's been pretty adamant about that. And by the way, I think Pajemski is very deserving of the minutes he's been getting, so there's no problem there. And then going back to your point from a couple minutes ago, yes, the default cannot be, well, let's just throw Moses Moody away. That doesn't mean you got to come in and launch him for 15 minutes a game. Like, you can play him in short spurts, and he does have to earn it. But it can't just be, well, we're going to play Chris Paul his normal 25 minutes, and then we're going to not play Moses Moody. And Gary Payton II, we're going to throw in for little spurts here and there. Oh, and by the way, that's like 10 more combinations that we have to figure out, and we don't really know what works, and you're just back to square one.
Yeah, and I actually would even, I think there's minutes for Moody, as I said, at the backup 3, but I think Payton, if Chris Paul's going to play, does that mean Chris Paul's playing now with Pajemski? Then you're going 2 small guards. He's going to play with Curry, 2 small guards. I actually think Payton is a little bit of a problem in the rotation, because it's a matter of, even if he's only playing 15 to 20 minutes, well, whose minutes is he taking? And, because if he's going to be on the floor, let's say as a backup, is he going to be on the floor with Pajemski? Is he now the backup 3 for Wiggins? Saric has been the backup 4. You know who the backups, Draymond, you put him as a center now, so it's him and Looney and Trace Jackson-Davis are the centers for the time being. Is it, Saric is the backup 4 now with Kuminga out there. And where does Payton fit? And if Payton fits, and he plays with Pajemski, who you need to play, then where does that leave Chris Paul as far as the other? So I actually think, and again, you want to have GP2 around, but I do think as somebody that's trusted and deserves to play and brings the Warriors a skill set that they need, I think he does. I think he is part of the problem for Steve Kerr, because those minutes have to come from somewhere, and they're going to come from the 2, 3, and 4 spots. And basically the 4 spots right now are Kuminga and Saric. The 3 spots right now are Wiggins and Klay Thompson. You also have to factor in Moses Moody. And the 2 spots are Klay Thompson and Pajemski. And so you almost have to play Pajemski more at the 1 maybe, but then you've got Chris Paul, whose minutes are going to come at the 1. So I think, as you start to filter out a depth chart for all of this, it's not as easy as it may seem. And I know Steve Kerr addressed it earlier in the week here on KNBR. He said not everybody's going to be happy, but they do have to figure out a way to balance this team and, I think, clear some of the glut now that they know what that top 6 is going to be. All right, 1 hour in the books. Great first hour. We'll get into the YouTube chat. Appreciate everybody watching on YouTube and Twitch as well, as we've kind of let that build up over the course of the first hour. It's John Dickinson. It's Just Dubs with JD on a Saturday morning here on the Sports Leader.
Dub Nation. Just Dubs with John Dickinson keeps rolling. Streaming live on YouTube at KNBR 1045.
I always feel like I have a role. I mean, it's just a matter of fact of just getting better every other day. And as much as I get better is as long as they're going to still trust me and giving me those type of minutes. And I'm not just going to go out there and just do things that I'm not supposed to do and expect to play 30 minutes. It's just go out there and give all I got. And obviously, they just see it and they trust me and just give me those minutes.
Jonathan Kuminga there. Quote of the year from Jonathan Kuminga. I think that was telling, and this was after the game against Philadelphia earlier this week. It's Just Dubs with JD here on KNBR, the sports leader. We've got Greg Silver on hand as well. I'm not going to be out there do things I'm not supposed to do and expect to get 30 minutes. That, to me, is like a light bulb going off that it's starting to click for Jonathan Kuminga, despite all of the stops and starts and the times that he was out of the rotation, and some rightfully so, some kind of wondering what the heck's going on, like the game against Portland that we've been referring to. At least I have been, going back to December. That didn't make a lot of sense to me. The Denver game in early January where he wasn't playing down the stretch as the Warriors lost that 18-point lead in the game to the Nuggets on the Jokic game winner. But I think things are in a better place. Like, he's playing more effectively, and I think he also has an understanding of what the Warriors coaching staff is asking him to do, and I think he's doing it more effectively, which is why the minutes have been there and I think are going to continue to be there for him. 808 KNBR, the number to give me a call or shoot me a text here on Just Dubs here on KNBR, the sports leader. We're going to get into the YouTube chat. Appreciate everybody watching on YouTube and Twitch, as well as we dissect the Warriors starting to find a little bit of momentum, 3-2 here in the last 5. The 2 losses by just a single point. And what can the Warriors do at the trade deadline? Who now are the keepers? Players coming back from injury. Do the Warriors have to clear the glut? How do the Warriors clear the glut at the trade deadline? And before we get into the YouTube chat, a couple of things here. Greg, you had mentioned just NBA news related. Joel Embiid, the injury from the other night over at Chase Center, a displaced flap of the meniscus in his left knee. That reporting from Shams Charania and Joe Varden of The Athletic. And so he's going to determine what he's going to do, rest and rehab or a procedure. And so, Embiid, who probably shouldn't have been out there against the Warriors on Tuesday, winds up injured, and he was really laboring in game. So a little bit of unfortunate news there. And before we get into the YouTube chat, Greg, did you see the story from Anthony Slater about on Draymond Green that dropped? And basically, Draymond, among the many things in that story, and there were a lot of good things, good little nuggets from that story. Draymond basically said he had considered the Grizzlies in the offseason when he was a free agent. And that there was a point in time, I think he called it a, quote, teensy bit of time, where he thought, maybe he was going to the Grizzlies. And Stephen Curry was aware. And I mean, could you imagine? Could you imagine, after everything that those two teams had been through, Draymond Green playing for the Grizzlies?
In a way, I can kind of see it, though. Like, in the same way that Marcus Smart...
Well, they lost Dylan Brooks, right?
Yeah, but Marcus Smart is a big attitude and heart guy. He went there, like... It's not completely out of the question. It would have been a shock to see Draymond in a different uniform, but if he was to be in a different uniform, I could actually kind of see it with the Grizzlies and him and John Morant becoming this really feisty duo. I'm looking at the story right now as you mention it, and a lot of good things in there too. And I like that he says he knows he'll be blamed for ruining the Warriors season. So the way to negate that is play well and win, in his words. But yeah, Anthony Slater always does a great job, and man, Grizzlies Draymond, that would have been tough for him, knowing how the Grizzlies season has gone, starting without Ja Morant, and then him coming back for a week, playing well, and then having to go out with season-ending shoulder surgery. I don't know how that would have gone for Draymond this year.
No, that would have been tough. And you look at Draymond also acknowledged when the most recent incident with Nurkic that landed him with the indefinite suspension came down, Joe Lacob had called him and said, quote, "I didn't call back. I almost hid. He gave me his word, and he stuck by it. I gave him my word, and I've let him down. It was probably a little cowardly." So, yeah, but Draymond ducking the owner after the owner ends up signing him to a 4-year contract and, amid multiple different problems that have landed him out of the lineup. So it's a good read. Check it out. Anthony Slater's one of the best in the Athletic. But, yeah, Draymond almost signed with the Grizzlies. What? And then, he full knowing that it's on him basically to right the wrongs by going out and playing well throughout the course of the season. And just another nugget from that in terms of a stat, Draymond's plus 92, and this via Anthony Slater as well, plus 92 in the 5 games since the Warriors have been back in action following the death of Coach Decky. He's plus 92 almost exclusively at center. And I think, we've talked about lineups and combinations and different things, and his ability to play center, it unlocks, I think, a lot of the rest of this Warriors roster, because if you're playing him at the 4, then you got to have another big out there with him. And if you have another big out there with him, it doesn't necessarily it just leads to some funky lineups, right? Then you can't play Kuminga because Kuminga's not a 3. You need to have a center that has a skill set that's complementary to Draymond's and the other on the floor. Just moving him to center with that group, I think, has unlocked something, and it's why the Warriors are, 3-2 and have a little momentum, but it also feels like it's a situation where the 3-2 could very easily be a little bit better, and this group may have a little bit of action here moving forward. All right, 808 KNBR. Before we get into the YouTube chat, let's go to Bob in Saratoga on the Sports Leader. Hey, Bob.
You guys are right on a couple of things. We need another big man. That's real important, who can shoot. And maybe we have to wait for the draft and get somebody like the guy San Antonio did. So I think that's maybe where we're going to get the best big man. But number one, Green should never shoot a 3. I mean, that's a turnover. But he's good on everything else. So just somebody should tell him, the coach, don't shoot a 3. I mean, he occasionally will make one, but that's a turnover. Next thing is, I think GPT could be brought in whenever the defense sort of makes a couple mistakes or slows down, and he'll recharge that defense just by his energy and everything else. And I think he doesn't mind, like you said earlier, playing a lot of minutes. So you keep him, and I think you just stick with the guys you have right now, because, like, the most important thing you guys have covered, totally agree, is don't do anything to hurt the momentum. So that's it for me.
Thanks, Bob. Hello? Good phone call. Draymond shooting the ball from 3 this year has been much more reliable. 42% from three-point range for Draymond Green, 42.1, which would be a career high. For Draymond. 38.8, the only other time Draymond even sniffed that level, it was in that 15-16 season when the Warriors won 73 games. So Draymond's scoring is up. It's as high as it's been since the 2017-18 season, and I think a big part of that has been him trying to make himself more of a threat, but it's also been his ability to knock down the 3. Well, it didn't need to be taking a lot of them. He's basically taken 3 a game. He's basically 1 of 3, 2 of 4, kind of, for the most part per game. And so I think you can live with that if you're Draymond, but there have been some games where, especially early on in the game, teams are just leaving him open, and he's taking that shot to try and keep him honest. So that's not a terrible shot. If the Warriors could get Wembanyama in the draft, that would be awesome. Greg, right? I mean, Bob a little bit out in left field on that one, and I don't think the Warriors are looking to draft a big. I think they've got Trace Jackson-Davis, who they like, And I think, it's a veteran type big that can rim protect, but also can score a little bit. And I think, that's the guy. And score, I think, from the perimeter, balance the floor in terms of shooting and bring in just a different element that this team lacks as you start to look at where the Warriors are at with these other players that deem themselves to be keepers. Let's get into the YouTube chat a little bit. Appreciate everybody watching on YouTube and Twitch as we get this thing moving here on Saturday mornings. Been doing it for about a month and look forward to continue it here over the course of the remainder of the Warriors season. Let's get into this. Appreciate everybody. Uncle Looney, Erwin Kwong, AJ Cruz 75, Ed Botello, a lot of the regulars here chiming in with a number of different topics and discussions. Erwin Kwong, good to see Kuminga starting to carry some of the scoring weight and not have to rely on Curry hero ball in the fourth quarter. I think the Warriors still are relying on that to a decent extent, but I think they do have a few more options, and just Kuminga's ability to get easy buckets has been huge. Erwin adding, Warriors need a true low post threat to have another method to create space. I think Kuminga almost in some ways I think could be a little bit of that. I don't want to put too much on his plate. He did it a little bit against Sacramento, but he also turned it over and missed some shots against Sacramento. I think it's more of paint presence plus shooting, but again, not in a Dario Saric kind of a way. Uncle Looney says Kelly Olynyk's decent around the basket, but he's, I think, primarily a three-point shooter. He's a little Saric-esque, I think. Better screener, better. He's more of a hard-nosed version. I know Olynyk's name's come up with the Warriors for a long time. Naz Reid would be a perfect fit, but no dice. Yeah, no, that is not going to be it. Uncle Looney, Xavier Tillman, always been nice when given minutes. Not sure any team wants to help the Dubs. Yeah, that's probably the truth, although Xavier Tillman is somebody that can shoot the three and play a big-time way. Woodpit 420. Saric is so bad defensively. He gives up all the offense right back. I think, he has been problematic defensively, especially when he's played the five. And so, I think Saric is a balance. I mean, there are a lot of matchups where Dario Saric really has helped the Warriors, and there's some other matchups where he's kind of hurt the Warriors as well. But appreciate everybody watching there on YouTube and Twitch. And, I wanted to address this too. DVDV, and we can bring in Greg Silver for this question as well. Hey, what's up with Dubs OT not being available on YouTube? We are available on YouTube, but with the advent of the Sports Phone KNBR show, and Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, it's just now all one YouTube stream from 6 a.m. all the way throughout the day. So on weekends like tonight, it'll have its own stream and video link separately. But again, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but we are still on YouTube and Twitch every night for Dubs OT, but it's just in the normal KNBR daily stream feed.
Yeah, so thanks for addressing this, DVDV, and thank you, JD, for making me be the bad cop. No, I'm kidding. So we
want the people to know where to find us, Greg.
As they should. So, we've been playing around with different bits of technology. Our digital team's been working real hard. So now when we have the Sports Phone show that feeds right into Dubs OT, it is live on the YouTube. So if you go to YouTube, you'll catch us live. The issue is that the streams at the end of it cut off after 11 hours and 55 minutes, and therefore a lot of the Sports Phone and the Dubs OT connected to the same stream don't show up on that same link. So what we're going to have to start doing is going and accessing the recorded file and then posting it separately. But I'm glad you brought that up because it's a fairly new thing. and it's something that we want to get to you. So thank you for addressing that, and we want, like JD said, the people need to know where to find us.
Yeah, and Jason Mischler, thank you, JD and Greg. You guys are on every day, ? We're on after every single Warriors game.
That's how it feels sometimes.
Every single Warriors game. It's going to feel that way over the next 2 weeks, no doubt, with the Warriors playing tonight and Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We've got some special live stream / podcast only editions that are going to be going on next week with the 49ers playing in the Super Bowl. But you will be able to find us on YouTube. You will be able to podcast hearing us after each and every show. So, yeah, you can get in the YouTube chat, even working toward maybe being able to take some calls via the YouTube stream as well here in the future. So, yeah, we are on after each and every game here on KNBR, the sports leader. So, yeah, join us for Dubs OT, and this is just Dubs, which is every Saturday from 10 until noon here on KNBR 104.5 and 680, the sports leader. So 808 KNBR, the number, as the Warriors did see the injury report that popped up. Nobody resting tonight for the Warriors in Atlanta with that injury report that dropped about 45 minutes ago. Dario Saric is still out, and Moses Moody had been ruled out for last night and today. He could, it sounds like, return in Brooklyn on Monday. But the same lineup for the Warriors, DeJounte Murray and DeAndre Hunter questionable for the Hawks. Trae Young is back for Atlanta and had a big game, Greg, last night against Phoenix as the Hawks beat the Suns in Atlanta. So this is one of those back-to-backs where you play 2 games at home. The Warriors have had a bunch of those. So the Hawks have got one of those with Phoenix last night and the Warriors coming in tonight. But this is a key. I think these next 2, Greg, are pivot point games for the Warriors. The Hawks are 21-27. Brooklyn is 19-28, and Brooklyn is really fallen off. Both of these teams right around 500, a little bit below at home. These are a couple of winnable games for the Warriors, these next 2, and I think games that the Warriors have to get before finishing the road trip in Philly and Indiana to again, continue that positive momentum. If we're talking about a 5-2 team in the last 7 with 2 losses by a single point come Monday night after the games in Atlanta and Brooklyn, I think then we're really talking about this team having some action and having a back end of the season that's worth saving after the trade deadline, Greg, and after the All-Star break.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I mean, there are seriously no off days on the schedule for the rest of the year as far as the Warriors are willing to take it. I mean, you're still 21-24, so they're definitely winnable games, and you have an opportunity to go sweep the season series with Atlanta and Brooklyn, but that by no means means it's a given or that you can relax and act like you can just show up and get it done. I mean, they're winnable games, but they're surely losable games, and I do think it's a very, very important stretch here when you have a little bit of momentum on the last couple of, or the last week, I want to say. You had a couple bad losses, but you also got 3 wins in there, and that's big. So you really got to take advantage of stretches like this if you're Golden State. Before we move on, JD, I actually wanted to get to one more item in the YouTube chat because I just admired Irwin's analogy calling Gary Payton II a double espresso shot. Great in limited doses. If I'm not mistaken, is Irwin also the one that had the Draymond fish sauce comparison? Because if so, I'm going to need a full roster by the end of the season.
And Irwin has added that I need a ficus in the lonely corner of my office / home studio. I guess right over here. I guess I need a. There's some shelving coming. Like there are additions made. I've got Willie Mays I've got Willie the statue here behind me. So yeah, on 2/4/24 day, right? Willie Mays Day tomorrow. I think that's something really cool. So yeah, honoring Willie. But there's more coming. I can promise you, after the Super Bowl and probably after the All-Star break, when the Warriors hit the road again. This is still a work in progress, but it's nice to have Willie looking over my shoulder. One of the all-time greats here on KNBR, the sports leader. 808 KNBR is the number. Steph on pace to play 75 games. Yeah, and the Warriors have needed it. Could you imagine if Steph had missed 20 games, which is basically what he had missed at this point last year? This Warriors team would be in big-time trouble at this point. And so, yeah, and I also wanted to clean up before we pause. I guess the issue, and our buddy Ernie Chavez was saying, I guess after 12 hours, the final hours of the stream aren't available on YouTube. So when it gets reposted, I guess they aren't. Is that true? I know I'm bringing I'm bringing the pre-show and the post-show onto the air a little bit. But, yeah, that's something we definitely need to clean up if that's the case, to be able to have that live in a watchable format. Maybe not a streaming format, but a watchable format.
Yeah, for sure. It's something that's a little bit new. So you can access it fully live at the time. It doesn't just go away right away, but then a couple of hours, I think, after we sign off and hit the stop streaming button on our end over here, then I think it just defaults to the first 11 hours, 55 minutes of the day, of course, which starts at 6 a.m. So usually by the time that we are on and Sports Phone are on, it just kind of cuts it right there. That means we still have access to the recordings, but we just got to take the extra step of posting it so that you can all access it, and we appreciate you looking out for it.
Yeah, and look for that, again, as we're making a list and we're getting all this stuff handled. Again, look for a lot of that post All-Star break to be cleaned up here as Dubs OT and Just Dubs continues to evolve here on the Sports Leader. Funny one from Hello there in the YouTube chat. Irwin, interior decorator. Well, absolutely. And I could use the help and the suggestions, but yeah, there's going to be some corner shelving going in for those that are into that sort of thing. With I don't know, we'll see. There'll be some memorabilia or some things that I've been able to pop up over the years. You always collect a lot of the hundreds and thousands of games that I've covered over the years. You always wind up with some. You always end up taking home some cool stuff sometimes. So yeah, we'll have a lot of that in the background here moving forward. But yeah, keep the suggestions coming. And then Douglas Mikes, one of our favorites, got to find a way to get some help at center. Draymond cannot play the 5 too much in the regular season. I just think they got to ride it out with Draymond. And I don't know about a Drummond. Like, again, I think if there's a big, it's got to be a post big, but it's got to be a skilled big that can shoot the three a little bit and just score a little bit around. Not score in the ways Trace Jackson Davis scores, right? He's got to be a complementary, different player. You know, Wendell Carter is the kind of player that I think is intriguing as far as that's concerned. So, yeah, no doubt. All right, 808 KNBR. We'll continue the conversation. We got one final segment straight ahead. It's 104.5 and 680, the Sports Leader.
with more blue and gold. Just Dubs with John Dickinson now continues on the Sports Leader. Streaming live at KNBR.com and on the KNBR app.
JK has just really figured it out, and the game has slowed down for him, and he's understanding now when to attack, how to attack. Thought he made some good passes tonight. He's just so powerful and explosive going to the rim, and I think he's just seeing the floor better than ever. And he's this last month, he's just I think he's really broken through, and it's just been amazing to watch because it's 2.5 years of a lot of work and ups and downs, and he's stayed with it the whole time. And I'm so impressed with what he's done, and he's really becoming a hell of a player.
Steve Kerr there on Jonathan Kuminga as Kuminga's rise continues. 20 or more in the last 8. He's doing it shooting above 50%. It's Just Dubs with JD, John Dickinson here on KNBR, the sports leader. 808 KNBR is the number as we try to parse out what the Warriors will do at the trade deadline. Are there big moves to be made? Doesn't seem that way at this point. I don't think, obviously, Steph Curry's going anywhere. Klay Thompson, despite reports to the contrary that the Warriors would listen, I don't think the Warriors are looking to do that over the course of the next 5 days. And then Draymond Green has unlocked not only Jonathan Kuminga, who suddenly is untouchable, at least for the purposes of the trade deadline on Thursday. He's also, I think, made Andrew Wiggins more of a keeper, and Wiggins himself has played better over the last week plus. So what does that leave for the Warriors? Could it be moves to be made involving some of the players that are set to return in pretty short order as far as the injuries, whether it's Chris Paul or Gary Payton II or Moses Moody? So 808 KNBR, we still got a couple of lines open between now and noon here on the Sports Leader to discuss that. Warriors back in action tonight in Atlanta, then Brooklyn, Philadelphia, Indianapolis, to close out the road trip before one home game against Phoenix, then right back out on the road for Utah, the Clippers at home, and then the Warriors wrap up the pre-All-Star break portion of the schedule in Utah again for the makeup game following the tragic passing of Coach Dejan Milojevic. 808 KNBR, back to the phones we go, and it's Connor in Dublin here on the Sports Leader. Hey, what's going on, Connor?
Hey, JD, how are you?
I'm doing well. What's on your mind this morning?
Stephen Curry not being in the All-Star starting lineup. I was when I first started, I was shocked, and immediately I started thinking, like, I know that when it comes to, like, All-Star, Pro Bowl, like all those kind of, you pick the best players out of each, conference, and they're voted by media and fans. And so it makes me wonder, like, does this mean people have, like, changed their thoughts about Stephen Curry? Do they think he's starting to lose his touch, stuff like that?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I do think that's probably part of the reasoning behind it, Connor. And look, Stephen Curry's an all-star for the 10th time. He is going to be a reserve. I mean, I look at waiver as the dursters, and it's basically, I mean, it's 4 forwards basically, and or 3 forwards and Jokic, right? So it's Durant and Luka and LeBron, who I don't think you can argue with any of those 3 being all-star starters, and then it's and look, I mean, I get it. Luka's basically a point guard. I mean, he's a primary ball handler, but it's Luke, and then Jokic is the 5th, and then Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's having an unbelievable year. So I think Stephen Curry definitely deserves to be an all-star, but do you deserve to be an all-star starter every single year? I mean, I think that can be sort of year to year as far as the evaluation and other players having big years. It doesn't mean that Steph isn't still the better overall player throughout his career and all of that. But I do think as he gets older, there are going to be times where maybe he has to fight for his spot harder than he had to in the past, or there are other players that maybe are on the come that are having better better years, Connor.
And thank you for taking my call and giving me this awesome breakdown. I really appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Go Warriors and go Niners.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. Appreciate it, man. Yeah, I don't know, Greg. Where do you stand on that? As far as there are people. I'll say this, and not that it's right, but there are people in Sacramento that are saying De'Aaron Fox should have made it over Steph Curry as a reserve, right? And so I mean. You're always going to have players that get snubbed, and I was having a conversation with a couple of people a couple of days ago with some of my Sacramento friends, and that was basically the conversation. It was like, well, Fox or Curry, and I said to him point blank, I said, well, if it comes down to Fox or Curry, Curry's making it because they're not keeping him out of the game, even if he's not starting. Fair or unfair, and but it's always a numbers game. And look, I don't think you can argue with Luka and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for this season getting the starting nod over Steph Curry. I just don't. And Curry's been great. I think the Warriors' team success has been down a little bit, and I think that's probably part of the reason why Curry ends up being a reserve this year.
Yeah, well, I actually had a good tweet about this earlier this week, or maybe it was a thread. They all kind of blend together at this point. But I think last year, De'Aaron Fox originally not getting voted in as an all-star was ridiculous. I think this year, I'm more okay with Fox not being on the team. I believe Sabonis absolutely should have been an all-star. I think to not have a King on the roster for 2 years in a row in terms of the original voting. Was Sabonis an all-star last year? He was an all-star.
He was.
Yeah, okay,
he
that's
was
right.
An
That's
all-star
right.
last year.
Yeah, he was.
And then Fox was added. Fox was added as an injury replacement, and I got to think he would be at the top of the list for that again this year.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So that's right. So we did have Sabonis last year. I think Sabonis should have been this year. Here's the thing.
They both made it, but Fox was an injury add. With
the All-Star game, it's like do you want to take it in the literal sense, or do you want to take this in the practical sense, right? Because I think, as much as I don't think LeBron James was an all-star starter in terms of was he one of the 5 best or 3 best in the front court for the first half of the season, you also got to consider if you're a fan and you head out to the all-star festivities and you want to go see the best players in the world and you just wait the first 6 minutes of the game or whatever it is to go and watch LeBron James, I can understand why he's a starter at this point. And I think the same argument could be made for Stephen Curry. But if we're going to take this in the literal sense, I can perfectly live with Stephen Curry being on the bench. And I do think that he probably was going to get in over De'Aaron Fox all along. And I've talked to a couple of my Sacramento people as well, because I know we both have a lot of ties up there. And they were like, Sabonis absolutely should have been an all-star. I don't get that. And they can all live with Fox not being on the list.
Yeah, and again, I think even the question, not to get too in the weeds on it, is Sabonis over whom? Anthony Davis? Is it Anthony Davis or Karl Anthony Towns? I think that's. I mean, Anthony Davis would probably be the one for me. So even though you could say Sabonis is deserving, you still have to take somebody off the list.
2 Lakers with a 500 record is a little bit crazy to me.
Yeah, I think Anthony Davis is the play, because Towns, I think, is deserving given the fact that Minnesota is basically been the leader. I mean, they're tied now with OKC, but 1 and 2 in the Western Conference really for the entirety of the season. And so, I think, people get worked up about it. I try not to get too worked up about it. I think Steph does deserve to be there. It's funny. I thought De'Aaron Fox, for really up until the last month, had been even better than he was. In fact, the people in Sacramento were talking about, well, this is Fox's team now, going back to even the playoffs. But then Sabonis has come on and been unbelievable as well. But yeah, people get. I think it is a sign as far as it relates to Curry that because the Warriors' team success is down, I think Gilgeous-Alexander was rewarded, and then Luka's just somebody that's always going to get a ton of votes. Period. Especially as a younger player, you could make the case LeBron, Durant, and then Jokic obviously is going to be on there. But not I didn't find it surprising that Curry was not among the all-star starters, at least for this season. We'll see if he can get back there next year. 808 KNBR, the number. It's just Dubs with John Dickinson here on The Sports Leader. What are the Warriors going to do at the trade deadline? Just kind of looking around the Western Conference, and this was something we touched on last night, Greg, on Dubs OT. It's just how good the Warriors have to be, and at what level are you comfortable if you're the Warriors as far as, making moves or balancing the fact that the reality is, like, this team is probably playing for a play-in tournament spot at this point until proven otherwise. And how does that factor in? Because the 6th seed in the West is on pace right now with Phoenix to be a 46-36 team. And for the Warriors and the 7 seed is even an identical record right now. So the 7 seed is a 46-36 team as well. So if you want to get yourself into that conversation, Greg, the Warriors would have to be 25-12 over the final 37 games. 25-12. I mean, that would be like 2 years ago level of play at the beginning after an 18-2 start, and then starting to level off from there before they ultimately pushed it all the way to 41-13 right around this time 2 years ago. So you think in terms of dominance, think in terms of playing at an extremely high level. 25-12 is 675 ball, right? Or 676 if you round up. How many teams are playing 676 in the NBA right now for the season? It's Boston, OKC, Minnesota, the Clippers, and Nuggets.
Not even the Bucks. Not even the Milwaukee Bucks.
That's it. Not even the Bucks are playing at the level that the Warriors would have to play at to get to 46-36, which, again, is the pace for the 7/6 seed. You'd be tied for 6th or 7th, depending upon a tiebreaker. And so the Warriors basically, to avoid the play-in tournament, are going to have to be a top 5 team in the NBA between now and the end of the season. How likely is that? It's basically you're playing for the play-in, and I think you're hoping you can get an inexperienced OKC or Minnesota, as good or great as those teams have been, and maybe you can knock one of those teams out as a 7 or an 8 as things start to take shape here with a little over 2.5 months to go before the end of the season.
How likely is it? I'll defer to my friend Borat on this one.
Not
very likely. I think that,
but that's the goal, right? Like, that's the pretty clear-cut goal now. I mean, I know we don't. I know it seems early, but it's like like this is not 48 wins get you the 3 seed. This is 48 wins might get you the 6 seed, as far as this year goes.
Yeah, and I think you got to look at the standings, and it's like they are 3.5 games away from Dallas, who is currently the 8, and I think there's a difference between 8 and 9, right? Because you can lose a play-in game and still get in the playoffs, although the Warriors were the 8 in the first year of the play-in tournament and then lost both, but we don't need to get into that whole discussion. So that's a very attainable goal. I think the top 4 are really separated on a large margin from a lot of the rest of the conference. OKC, Minnesota, the Clippers, and the Nuggets are all within about a game and a half of each other. And then the Kings are 5 games back. So, and then you get Phoenix and New Orleans, and they're kind of floating around 6-7. And then you got Dallas at 8 right now, 26-22. And then you have the Lakers and the Jazz and the Rockets ahead of the Warriors. And those 3 teams, they could theoretically catch, with a really hot week or so. They got to play really, really good sustained ball against some tough opponents if they will even want to have a conversation at getting 7 or all the way to 6. I mean, I'm with you, JD. They got to be a top 5 team in the NBA, and it's doable. Like the Celtics from a couple years ago in their finals run, they finished the regular season 28-7 or something ridiculous. Yeah,
Yeah, can they? I mean, that is the bigger picture question. Can the Warriors be the Lakers of last year? Now, the Lakers completely changed their roster at the deadline last year and did that. Can you be the Celtics? I know Steve Kerr mentioned within the last week the Celtics of 2 years ago that were basically a 500 team or slightly under right around the end of January. So the Warriors, I think, have surpassed that point of the season. Maybe not quite. But they were basically, I think they were 22-22 or 25-25, something like that. And then ended up red hot down the stretch. I think they lost like 5 or 6 games, of the last 30. And so ended up, working their way up the Eastern Conference standings, then made their run to get to the finals and take the Warriors to 6. That was a team that basically internally was able to come together and be a better version of themselves. I think that's probably the closer match than the Lakers, who revamped the entire thing around LeBron and Anthony Davis a year ago. But I think that's the hope, is that, Kuminga's emergence, Draymond now unlocking Wiggins and Kuminga together, makes Wiggins a keeper. Now you've got Podziemski in the mix. You've got other players that are coming back off of injury. How do you balance that? Do you look to make a move? I don't think there's going to be a major move made, Greg, for the Warriors over the course of the next 5 days. I really don't.
Yeah, like I alluded to a little bit earlier in the show, I think that this roster is largely intact, and maybe there's a small move with Chris Paul out of there or a Moses Moody or something. I doubt it, but I don't see them parting ways with Andrew Wiggins. Definitely not Kuminga at this point. Draymond's not going to go anywhere. I doubt that they would trade Klay Thompson at this stage of the season. I think for all that Klay has done, and I don't know if they re-sign him in the offseason, but they have, at the very least, are going to want to give him the right to finish out this year with the Warriors and then have an honest conversation with him about money and if he's willing to take a pay cut, if they don't see eye to eye on the money. But I don't think they just go, all right, Klay, well, we got to ship you off. And by the way, a story came out, as I'm sure you saw earlier this week, JD. They're not going to do any of that in terms of like trading Klay Thompson unless Steph Curry signs off on it. And I think that's a really, really low chance that he does in the middle of the season.
Yeah, look, the end may be coming for the Warriors and Klay Thompson, but I don't think it's coming in the middle of the season. I think you said it. I think
Agreed.
Klay still provides a championship level. He's still somebody that has the championship level experience. He's still somebody that while you need more shooting on this Warriors roster, is a shooter when he's right. So I don't think you can just move off of a guy like that. And again, you're building momentum based on the way things have been here over the course of the last couple of weeks. So I don't think you want to do anything to really screw with that. Erwin Kwong, JD, thoughts on Drummond? I don't think Drummond fits. Because I feel like Drummond is going to play the same way that Trace Jackson Davis is going to play. And I know Drummond's a bigger body and a better rebounder and all of that, but I just don't think it's that kind of big. If the Warriors are going to add a big, I think it's going to be a big that has some offensive skills to his game, and not not a guy like Saric, who's not a passable stretch five, but an actual five. An actual, again, Wendell Carter Jr. is somebody who comes to mind as far as, having the potential to be, the kind of player that maybe would fit with what the Warriors are trying to do. And I'm looking at his numbers. He's a 40% 3-point shooter this year. He has dealt with some injuries as well, and so we'll have to see. But it's that type of player. I'm not saying it's him specifically, but it's that type of player, and still a relatively young player as well. Wendell Carter Jr. still not even 25 years of age. He'll be 25 coming up on April the 16th. So final couple of minutes here, just Dubs. with JD and Greg Silver here on KNBR, the sports leader. Should let everybody know that we are going to have Dubs OT tonight. Look for us right around 6:45, 7 o'clock, probably closer to 7 o'clock when the Warriors go final in their game in Atlanta against the Hawks. We'll see if the Dubs can make it 3 consecutive victories. And then on to Brooklyn and Philadelphia and Indiana. And we also should just let everybody know what's going to be coming up throughout the course of next week. So we are going to have a couple of live streams on YouTube for next week and podcast versions following each show, Greg, due to some other programming, the Super Bowl week programming here on the Sports Leader. So a little bit different after tonight for the 3 away games next week. We're going to still have a full Sports Phone show, Sports Phone KNBR with Kerry Crowley. We're still going to have a full Sports Phone show on, all throughout the week next week to keep everybody locked in on what's going on in Las Vegas. But then following the Sports Phone shows, we're gonna lock up and basically do post-game podcast and streams a little bit later following the Warriors games. So keep it locked on social media. We'll make sure we get it tweeted out and put out on all the socials, Greg, as far as what the times are going to be and just how you can get the full Dubs OT complement of content following these games during a very special week here at KNBR.
Oh, yeah. I mean, anytime you have a week leading up to the Super Bowl, then it's going to be just amazing. I know you're going to Vegas very soon, JD. That's going to be super. It's just an all-around great experience to have the 49ers there and represent the Bay Area. And, yeah, make sure you're following KNBR on social media and YouTube, or follow myself and JD on those platforms as well, because we don't have all the details ironed down in terms of the time and the day that we're going to be doing every show, but we'll be making sure to get that information out to you well in advance of when it comes. The good news is you will have no YouTube disappearance. All the shows will be streaming on YouTube, and they will stay on YouTube, so there's going to be no shortage there in that space. We're still kind of working with the details of the back-to-back. I know they play Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday, we have to work out some details of if there will be a show. But the absolute worst case, we will do a Thursday show that's a little bit extended for both post games. Obviously in the studio, it's a bit light.
And a trade deadline. Yeah, and a trade deadline show as well. Like we can.
Yes.
The beauty of this is we can kind of hop on at any point and react to what's going on as far as the trade deadline. If there are some big moves, that'll be a big part of the Thursday night show at a minimum. And you never know. Maybe we pop on during the day and get you a podcast and a YouTube stream based on things that happened at the trade deadline. A couple of people in the chat saying you're talking about Nikola Vucevic. Vucevic could be he could be an interior type scorer that I think has the potential to help the Warriors. Not the three-point shooter that I think the Warriors would necessarily want, but I guess three-point shooting is more secondary if Saric is still going to be around. Just somebody that can score a little bit as a center to augment some of the minutes that Draymond's not going to be out there. But Vucevic might be a little too good at this point, right, Greg?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, he's at least reached all-star level peak before, and that's always going to change the financials for a player, right? No matter.
Well, you might just have to play him too many minutes, because he's playing 33 minutes a game, and I don't think the Warriors are necessarily looking for somebody that's going to play 33 minutes a game. Great stuff. Appreciate you, my man. We'll talk to you tonight right around 7 o'clock for Dubs OT following the Warriors and the Hawks. Appreciate Raf Corral in studio as well. And we'll be back tonight, 7 o'clock, Dubs OT. Keep it locked right here on KNBR 104.5 and 680, the sports leader.